If you follow the content strategy profession, you've probably encountered Jonathon Colman at some point. He's a frequent keynote speaker, and he regularly shares his insights on social media. We had a great conversation about his career and about the evolution of the fields of content strategy and content design. But I want to start this episode with an offer that Jonathon made after we had finished recording the main interview. Here's what he said when I asked him about his role in recruiting and helping speakers for Confab, the big content strategy conference.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really big deal. And Confab, Brain Traffic, Christina, her whole team, they've done a great job of promoting this. What they really value for Confab is bringing new voices, diverse voices to the event. That means people who might be first-time speakers, underrepresented minorities. I want to do everything I can to help support that. So if you perhaps are a first-time speaker or haven't spoken much in the past or are struggling with something in putting together that speaking proposal, I would love to help. I've already mentioned this on Twitter, but if you just reach out to me directly, say on Twitter or LinkedIn or my website, wherever you feel best doing it, doesn't matter to me. I would love to volunteer to do everything I can to support you putting together your proposal, because I would love to come see you at Confab next year.
If you'd like to take advantage of Jonathon's generous offer, I've included links in the show notes to the online profiles that he mentions.
Welcome to the Content Strategy Insights podcast, where accomplished content strategy experts share their wisdom with our friends in the content community. We talk with professionals who work across the span of content strategy, from small businesses to big enterprises, from content design to content marketing, from solo consultancies to huge agencies. Our mission is to democratize content strategy, to make its principles and practices accessible to everyone. And now, here's your host, Larry Swanson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 51 of the Content Strategy Insights podcast. I'm really happy today to have with us Jonathon Colman. Jonathon is currently a senior content designer at Intercom in Dublin, Ireland. And I want to have Jonathon tell you a little bit more about his background, because his career, I think, is like almost a microcosm of the whole discipline of content strategy and content design. So welcome, Jonathon, and tell us a little bit about how you got where you are today.
Hey, Larry, it's good to be here and great to see you again. So I'm a senior design manager here at Intercom, and I've been here in Dublin, Ireland. I moved here from Seattle last December, so I've been here about 8 months or so. And like you said, I've done lots of different things. I look young because I've always got this baseball hat on. But I'm in my 40s, and I've been practicing in some area of content since the mid to late 90s. So I started off as a technical writer, writing software manuals for IBM. And again, my apologies to everyone for those typos. I'm really sorry about it. Wish I could go back and fix it, but no, actually I know. Started out as a tech writer, worked for 2 years in the Peace Corps in West Africa, doing public health education and infrastructure and capacity building, things like that. And when I came back, I worked for about a decade in environmental conservation nonprofits, really doing anything anyone would teach me or let me do, sometimes things they wouldn't let me do, and I did them anyways. That was in the period where you may remember Web 2.0 took off. So I started getting these nonprofits involved in very early forms of content marketing that would drive traffic to their websites or help them otherwise support their missions. During that period also, I went from being what we used to call a webmaster, I'm making air quotes here, who sort of did everything from technical stuff to coding and production and server stuff, more towards doing front-end design and production, and then later on marketing. And so it was in that period that I began to get really interested in SEO and in what people were starting to call inbound marketing. And I moved to Seattle, ended up joining REI, the Outdoor Consumer Equipment Cooperative, and I focused solely on SEO for them for 4 years. We did a lot of SEO, content marketing, started all those programs and got them off the ground. And it was there that I had the opportunity to work with Samantha Starmer, who is a leader in the field of information architecture. And she had this brilliant idea that you could take a marketing discipline like SEO and you could have it sit with a group of people doing UX. And because of that, you would get better SEO, but you would also get more effective UX because things would be more relevant. That idea was well ahead of its time. And it helped shape not just the practice at REI, but I'd argue it had industry impact, especially in retail, where there's just so much opportunity for SEO with things like product taxonomy, navigation, filters, all of that. So by being exposed to all these UX people and information architects, I became very interested in that field. And I joined the master's degree program at the University of Washington's iSchool. Really had a strong focus on information architecture there, and switched into a principal UX architect role at REI in my last year there, and then transitioned to join Facebook's content strategy team. Whereas both an individual contributor content strategist as well as a content strategy manager for almost 6 years, and then joined Intercom just this last winter. And
Great.
Here we are today.
Nice. Yeah, there's so much in there. One little thing I do want to follow up on when you were talking about that, the way SEO has evolved, there's this concern with satisfying user intent. That's kind of the top level thing that's there. And that's sort of like emerged as like the last 2 or 3 years is kind of a common and broad understanding of that. But you were doing that, 10 years ago? I mean, you were essentially, doing the things that need to happen to make that, to implement that. You really did pioneer things, I think, at REI.
REI has the benefit of, first of all, they've always cared about really providing great customer service, and they've done that with this very just personal and authentic brand voice. And if you are an REI customer, if you've even just ever set foot in one of their stores, like you already know that. They never took shortcuts online, so they never bought links, they never did any black hat stuff. And because of that, they always had this very positive trust and reputation and quality. And the thing that most SEOs won't tell you about working for a beloved brand like REI is that a lot of the hard work is already done for you. Like it's a little bit easier to succeed because people like you naturally. And of course, they're doing things like building links to you and engaging with you. That doesn't come for free. You have to earn that trust and respect. But in our SEO and our content marketing efforts, we never did anything to violate that. We always just tried to build more engagement and just more trust and respect on top of what we already had. It's a lot harder in an organization that doesn't have that sort of foundation to build on. So I think we had a leg up there, and it just made the work easier.
Yeah, that's so, and just in the way that that you were structured in a business and a management side, you were jumping ahead to content design, even though you didn't call it that. I'm trying to, when I look back, like the brilliant hiring managers at Intercom said, God, this guy is doing exactly what we need to do. I wonder if they perceived you as having been doing it for like 10 or 15 years.
Well, that's a weird thing about content strategy, content design, UX, whatever we call these roles now, is that, I think this industry's really started to form with the publication of Christina Halverson's book. But there's several people who will tell you, well, I was doing content strategy, back in the 90s or potentially back in the 80s, or I was working in publishing, and I've been, helping brands build their editorial processes or find their voice or all these things for, decades, which is a completely legitimate thing. That's very real. I just think in the past 10 years with Christina's book and the community she's built out of Brain Traffic and with the Confab conference, that's really where all these people, they always say about Confab is you'll find your people there. So I think that's what really, she created this home for people And we all sort of coalesced around it. I was certainly drawn into it by her book. And that's what inspired me to really want to take the next steps forward, both in my education as an IA, but also fundamentally like joining the content strategy field when I joined Facebook.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's just fast forward to the future, to the present. I mean, to right now. Like, tell me how you do content design in Intercom. Like, what does the term mean, and how does it manifest in terms of how you guys operate?
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. Intercom has the benefit of having two of our co-founders come from the world of design. And that was one of the things that really attracted me to Intercom, because we're not in this position of designers of any kind having to like fight for that seat at the table, or have barriers to our success, or have difficulty influencing the product development, which kind of unlocks us, and it lets us do a lot more than is ordinarily possible, where teams are sort of stuck in this mode of fighting for visibility or not having their work recognized. And that sort of ends up tying their hands in terms of what they can achieve. So content design has been part of Intercom's product development process for a really long time. Elizabeth McGuan, who's now with Shopify, started the practice here, and hired the first IC to work here, and really sort of set the tone for what content design can do. And something content design at Intercom has been really focused on because of that is mapping out concepts. So we often say here that content design is concept design, which is to say that what we do more so than writing sentences is building systems. And we always value a really strong system much more than just trying to fiddle with the words on the surface. So I sometimes think of this as like three-dimensional content design, where we talk a lot about UX writing and about getting the words right on the surface, things with like voice and tone and terminology and things like that. But if you get much deeper into the product, then you can start to figure out, how should it be built? How should it work? What is the system that drives all those surface interactions and the words, as well as all the buttons and navigation and widgets and doodads and features and all that interaction design.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Do most of the people on the team, because it's really common for the content folks to come out of journalism or publishing or marketing, copywriting, or something like that. But are there more folks who come out of like design disciplines in your content design team? Or tell me about the pedigree, I guess, of your team.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of people who have been content designers for a while. There's actually two of us have come from technical writing originally. So like one of the hallmarks of content strategy or content design as an industry is that, we're a big tent. Like we just love that people are excited about the things that we're excited about. So we're happy to have people join us from, marketing, tech writing, design, other industries, IA, what have you. It's just that once you're here, especially at Intercom, where we have this, really well built out discipline, we want to do what we can to help you learn and ramp up and be successful. And for us, that means more than just writing the words on the surface. It also means defining the concepts and the system that powers them.
Got it. Hey, you're reminding, as you talk about that, I've seen, where I feel like, at least me, I feel like I'm kind of piecing together what's going on in content design from what Sarah Richards says. And some of what you said about how you operate really mirrors what she talks about, like that she would say how to write something is an editorial assignment, whereas how to get the point across is content design. Or I'm also thinking, when you talk about concept design, about like Mike Atherton and Carrie Haynes domain modeling that they talk about in designing connected content. So those are just two things that occur to me. What other like influences or influencers or people or inspiration do you take out there? And do those two references make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, if you haven't read Sarah's book or Mike and Carrie's book, they're brilliant books. You should go pick them up. You can find them at any of the best bookstores or even the mediocre ones, because they're that good. And some of the other things we look to is, I'm going to pause here for a second because I can't remember the title of this book. Holy shit. Hold on a second. Is this the right book? Yes. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. That's the right one. All right. Let me jump back into this. So some of the other things that we turn to for inspiration here are books that exist outside of either the content strategy, content design, or information architecture, or even the UX community. So one of my favorite books is called Thinking in Systems, and it's by Donella H. Meadows. And I think it's so just intensely valuable and useful for content designers that I make sure everyone on my team has bought a copy and I reimburse them for it. It's simply the most helpful book I've read probably in the last decade. And what it does is help you understand all of those deeper forces and elements and objects, how they're related and how those relationships provide value for really anything, or more than anything, everything in the world, including the world itself. So I can't recommend it highly enough. It's again called Thinking in Systems, a Primer by Donella H. Meadows.
Well, I will order that as soon as we get off the air, and I'll put a link in the show notes for sure. Yeah, that sounds great. Well, that's super interesting how, I think we all take inspiration from a lot of places. Like right now, I'm just starting, I've identified as a content strategist for 2 or 3 years now, and I'm just starting to read up on strategy, which is, actually, let me jump from that a little bit, because when you were at Facebook, you were labeled a content strategist. But that role that you had, when you meet people at Google who do content strategy, and they're called UX writers, but it's almost line for line, the very similar jobs at those two places. How do you see a sort of emerging codification, of how we talk about what we do as a profession?
Yeah, I worry less about the titles. I'm just not that concerned about it, and more about, hey, no matter what you call yourself, do you have the ability to do what you do best? Do you have the ability to do that thing to the best of your ability? Meaning, like, are you unlocked? Or is there anything blocking your progress? Is your organization getting in the way? Those are the kinds of barriers like I want to help break down. So if you call yourself a content strategist, but you can, do everything you love doing and are great at, fantastic. You've literally won the lottery. There are many people who are struggling to get to that point. When people have their hands tied that way, when the organization gets in the way or puts up these barriers or makes people feel like they're not valued or that the work that they're doing is not impactful, that just results in like worse products getting out into the world, and people feeling bad, and like it just reduces the value and sort of the impact of everything. I think we can do better than that. And I think that people who are set up well in their roles, like we are at Intercom, we actually have a responsibility to help the rest of the industry by sharing what we know and what we've learned along the way.
Right. And I guess, and you're less concerned. I'm sort of, I don't know. I worry about titles, and I'm a little bit of, I try to be an evangelist and a democratizer of the discipline. So I would love to have a codified, a controlled vocabulary to talk to people about what we're doing, but I'm not holding my breath waiting for that to happen. So
yeah, I think we're probably a ways out from that. That's okay. But what I think it means is that as an industry, content strategists, content designers, UX writers, and so on, we need to get a lot better at introducing ourselves and talking about what we do, in particular, the value and like the real world outcomes of what we do, and focus less on our titles.
Right. Because I think we all, it's kind of like, it when you see it, you get it, you get the benefits of involving content people earlier in projects or things like that. But yeah, it's we don't have that guidebook yet to to help us? Well, I guess kind of apropos of that, but also you mentioned before, like, helping designers who feel like their hands are tied, or dealing with organizational things about how to do your work. You've managed some, like when you went to Facebook, that was not a very big content strategy team, and when you left, it was much larger. Tell me about kind of running this, manage, because it's a little bit meta, but I think it's super germane. But how do you manage content strategy and content design activities?
Yeah, so when I joined Facebook, they were actually a decent sized team, larger than mine now, certainly. I think I was their 17th person on the team, which probably sounds like a lot, except for that now they have over 300. If I'm not mistaken, I haven't been keeping up on that, obviously, since I left. But they're a massive team, and they just do so much excellent UX work, really highly impactful. But what I learned at Facebook has affected my management practice. And in particular, there's a woman I hired at Facebook named Elless. And what happened along the course of our careers together at Facebook is that we actually swapped roles. And she became my manager, and I became an individual contributor working on her team. And then we later both grew along the management track together. And something that I learned from her that I want to pass on to other content strategy or content design managers is that for several years, we sort of played the game of trying to stretch our teams across more and more products and more initiatives and products and everything, trying to do more. Right? We wanted to show people that we were great partners. We were ready to work with them. And if they just let us get a foot in the door, we could do something valuable for them. And that was true. And I think when you look across the industry, you sort of see that most content design teams are multitaskers. They work across many product teams. I know content strategists, content designers who work across more than 10 teams at a time, which just blows my mind. So what we learned at Facebook is that maybe, just maybe, this isn't a great idea. And so what we chose to do is to have content strategists there work on just one or two teams at a time. And that's something I've also brought to Intercom. And we do this because, we try to stretch ourselves across, 10 or more teams a lot of times, because content design, content strategy, these are emerging fields and most people don't know about it or understand it. And so they don't really have an idea of how to work with us. And that's okay. It's not their fault because we're new. It's our fault because we're not explaining things clearly enough. So at Facebook, what I learned is that, we believe that impact is more deeply felt when content strategists or content designers can work on a one-to-one basis with product designers and product managers. And that's really the only way to make magic happen. That's how you get the best results. And I think we all know that. It's just that historically, content strategy teams have been afraid to take that leap because we know that if we don't work with a particular team, probably the product is not going to be as good. Bad things will go out the door. We're worried about that as being content strategy's fault rather than the organization's fault. So that means if we can step away from that fear, what we'll get is that content designers and strategists will show up to just that one team or those 1 to 2 teams that they work with as being fully dedicated and committed partners. And that means they can take part in all of the team's rituals. They can go to all the stand-ups, the retrospectives. They can have impact on planning and the roadmaps and all of that. And so when content designers are present for those things, it's easier for the team to understand what they do. Like you said earlier, you don't understand it until you see it. And when you see it and you understand its impact, it's going to be more deeply felt. And teams are going to begin trusting you. You'll earn those relationships. And teams will understand what you do best, how you do it best, why it matters. And when you're a reliable partner like that, and the team sees you working on solving their problems every single day, it's going to be far more deeply felt and recognized than when you just talk with them for 15 minutes. So reliable partnerships like this unlock opportunity. That's really the magic. That's what we're all trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the people listening to this podcast may be content designers or strategists who are looking to kind of take that next leap in their career and get into a role like that. Because I've met so many people who, like you said, they support 5 or 10 different products or initiatives, and you're like, oh my God, I can't even imagine. Do you have any this isn't like a career how-to thing, but it just occurs to me that I wonder if there are any, 1 or 2 job hacky kind of ideas that you might have about how to take it from where you're, paring it down. I assume this is probably like you go from 10 to 5 to 2, and all of a sudden you're on one team and things are way better. Do you know people who've done that, or can you describe how somebody might navigate that pathway?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what we did at Facebook. I've done it here at Intercom as well. The idea is what you have to do is, as a content strategy or content design, UX writing, whatever you call yourself, as that manager or leader, you need to show that your team will have more impact if they work in a different way. And in order to do that, you have to gain the trust of other leaders so that you can just have this conversation. The thing is, I think people who think that content strategy or content design is only those words on the surface, like they don't understand why you would do anything except for work across every single team and just sort of. My friend Amy Thibodeau at Shopify, she has this great way of talking about this. She calls it dusting the content. If all you're doing is dusting the content, why couldn't you work across all these different teams at the same time? So the argument you have to make is that you can do better work, build better products that have better outcomes and results and impact in the world if you work more deeply. And then you have to show what that deeper work entails. That's where this Thinking in Systems book really comes in handy, because what it helps you do when you understand systems thinking, you can actually map out a product ecosystem, and not just the content. This isn't just a content audit or a content model. It's nothing like that. It's the actual repositories of information, how different entities within that repository are linked, the value of linking them in those particular ways, like what that does for your business maybe, or for your customers or your users. And you design the product experience from the bottom up so that by the time you get to writing the words on the interface, you've already built out the system of concepts, all those entities, you know what they are and how they work. So rather than trying to do things from the top down or even just at the top only, like you've actually engaged in building a product, not just in writing the words on the surface. So if you can show other leaders the value of doing that, and if you can get them to buy into just like hey, let's just try this once, this cycle or this quarter or whatever the time period is that matters to your company, let's do a test with this one person on my team, or maybe if I'm an army of one, maybe it's just with me, and I'm going to dedicate a lot of time to our highest priority initiative. Maybe that's a particular product or some other line of work. And I'm going to sit with that team. I'm going to do nothing else but work with that team. And we're going to limit the damage of, in case I'm wrong, by this being a really time-limited thing. So maybe it's just 6 weeks. But over those 6 weeks, if I can show you that I can have outsized impact, that I can help teams work faster and work better and achieve more, then that's going to help make the case for me to do more of this in the future. And so little by little, you'll begin to win those arguments, and you'll be able to bring people from this, very stretched thin setup to one where they're deeply embedded and they're working one-to-one with a product designer, product manager, researcher, analyst, and a group of engineers. And when they do that, the impact of content strategy and content design is going to be so much more deeply felt. That it's going to be far easier to have those conversations about like, hey, you've seen how well this can work when it's dedicated. Now let's try increasing the headcount of this team so that we don't have all these other products or initiatives or projects that are uncovered by content strategy or content design.
Yeah. Have you ever blogged about that? And if you haven't, I'm just going to say there's a lot of people who would appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't say. One of the exciting things about Intercom is that we always encourage people to write and speak. I have been writing more here. I do hope to get a post out about this. Just having this conversation with you, Larry,
Okay, no, I hope
makes it far more likely. So yeah.
Yeah, no, because I think that everything you just said, it's so, and there's so much to it because every organization is different. And I think it was, I remember it was Jared Spool when I had him on the show. He talked about that everything is bespoke, that like there's principles and things that can guide our practice, but every organization, every situation you're in is going to be unique. And what you just said sounds like a really great approach to that. So yeah, I won't push too hard on that. But anyhow, hey, I noticed we're coming close to time, Jonathan. I always like to give my guests a chance before we wrap up. Is there anything anything that I haven't asked you about, or that's just on your mind about content strategy or content design that you would like to share with our folks before we wrap?
Well, I think one last thing on this point around like how to grow your team and how to get them down to focusing on just 1 to 2 things is that this isn't just sort of like a thought in my head. Like we did this over several years at Facebook. Again, Ella, Mayon Harris, and I, and we grew our content strategy team there by give or take. In my last year, my team grew by 5 times in a single year. And that's because we were able to show that content strategists have far more impact and achieve far greater and more deeply felt outcomes by working in this way. And it took us a while to get there to that point where we could make this argument and run these tests and show the impact, but that was time really well spent. And it had this, outsized impact. So I would encourage people to try this in their organizations. It's what I'm doing in Intercom. It worked really well at Facebook. And give or take, like the short version of this advice is do less, better. Work on fewer things, but with far more focus. And when you do that, teams will see what you do. They'll understand it. They'll recognize you and your impact. And beyond all that, you're just going to build better things. So I would greatly encourage people to do that.
I love that. Do less, better. That's perfect. Well, that's a great note to end on. Thanks so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Larry. And hope you continue to enjoy things in Seattle. Take care of that city for me. I really miss it.
Well,
come over to Ireland and say hi sometime.
I definitely will. And I do want to say that like every time your name comes up here in Seattle, people go, "Oh, Jonathan," it's like we miss you, and you're welcome to come back anytime. I understand there's some big tech companies here who could use your help. Just saying. So
just some guy. That's all.
Okay. Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Cheers. Have a great day.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. If you can think of a friend who might enjoy this episode, please share it with them. And please join us again for our next content strategy interview.